Hi everyone. Today we're going to be learning about bacteria. Bacteria are one of the domains of living things that you have already been introduced to through a couple videos and your notebook page. What I want to do today is really focus in on the details around what make up bacteria and why bacteria are so important. So, bacteria can be good or bad. I know most people probably associate the word bacteria with bad germs and being dirty and being sick, but believe it or not, bacteria can be good or bad. And they mostly reproduce asexually. And so, what we're going to focus on today is we're going to focus on how those bacteria reproduce and also how those bacteria can be good or bad. So, bacteria can be good or bad, and they mostly reproduce asexually. Now, bacteria are really tiny in size. They're like almost too tiny to even see in a microscope sometimes, and you need a really powerful microscope to see them. Bacteria are really tiny in size, and they have a couple different shapes. They are shaped like rods, they can have spiral shapes, or they can be spherical, or shaped like a sphere, or round. Okay, and so what we're going to talk about today is a couple different questions about bacteria. The first question is, what structures do bacteria have? So, a couple important structures are that bacteria actually are considered prokaryotes because they do not have a nucleus, right? So, the nucleus is a structure actually that the bacteria doesn't have. And that is why they are considered prokaryotes. Now, some structures that bacteria do have a couple different jobs. One structure that bacteria do have is something called a cell wall. Now, this is kind of like a wall around the cell, right? Pretty self-explanatory, but that cell wall protects the bacteria and keeps it from drying out. If you don't have a cell wall on your bacteria cell, a lot of water, a lot of fluids could get out of the cell and it could dry out. The cell wall obviously also protects from different threats outside of a bacteria cell. Also, a structure that bacteria have is called the cell membrane. Now, the cell membrane is right inside the cell wall. It's on the outside of the cell, just like the wall would be. But the cell membrane's main job is to let certain substances in and out of the cell. It's kind of like the gatekeeper, right? So if you were picturing a bacteria cell as a little city, the cell wall would be, well, a fence or a wall around the city, and then the cell membrane would be maybe the workers working at a gate, getting into and out of the city, right? And they would control who gets in and who gets out, right? And so all these structures are in a bacteria cell. And you'll hear me talk about bacteria cells a lot because most bacteria are unicellular, right? They have only one cell. They're made up of one single cell. Now, judging by that, right, bacteria are, of course, a living thing. So what they need is to get energy, right? And they get energy from their food. Okay, and so the next question is, how do bacteria get their food? They do this through a process that we are pretty familiar with called photosynthesis, right? And so that makes bacteria autotrophs. Bacteria are autotrophs because they make their own food and they get their energy from the sun. Bacteria are autotrophs because they automatically get energy from the sun. Now, some bacteria create food from chemicals around them, and actually, some bacteria even take in food through that structure that we were just talking about called the cell wall, right? So, because bacteria are living things, they still need food for energy, right? And so, some bacteria get their energy from sunlight and they make their own food, but others get their bacteria from other places, like taking it in through their cell wall, or even creating food from chemicals around them. Okay, bacteria also reproduce in a couple different ways. Okay, up top, we said they mostly reproduce asexually, which is true, but not all bacteria reproduce asexually. The ones that do, right, will go through something called binary fission. Binary fission is basically just a bacteria cell splitting into two identical bacteria cells, right? Binary fission is just a fancy, sciencey term for a bacteria splitting into two, right? And so, binary fission only requires one individual bacteria cell, so that is a form of asexual reproduction. Bacteria can also go through a process called conjugation. And conjugation is when the genetic material from one bacteria cell is passed to a nearby bacteria. And they do this through a special structure on the bacteria that will transfer genetic material from one bacteria to another bacteria. Now, conjugation, on the other hand, is different from binary fission because there's no cells dividing, there's no cells splitting in half. What's happening is genetic material is being passed to a different bacteria cell. So, conjugation requires two individuals, which makes it sexual reproduction. So, lastly, our last question is, how are bacteria used in the real world? Right? This is usually everyone's big question because people are wondering, well, why do I care about bacteria if they're so small and I can't even see them? Okay, so bacteria give us oxygen because they are autotrophic. Because due to them getting their energy from the sun and making food from that energy, what they do is they release oxygen, right? And oxygen is the gas that most animals and other living things breathe in, right? So bacteria give us oxygen. Also, some bacteria are good bacteria, and they actually are in your gut to help you digest food. We will find out a bit more about these types of bacteria in the coming days, but what's important for you to understand, right, is that these good bacteria do a really good job of helping you digest food and fight off bad bacteria in your body. And bacteria can also fight off bad or harmful chemicals when they are put into the environment. What bacteria can do is they can clean up different environments by getting rid of harmful chemicals that are put into them. There are all kinds of different processes that can happen inside of bacteria to help with this process. So, hopefully you remember that bacteria can be good, they also can be bad, but there are a lot of good bacteria that really get a bad reputation when we're talking about bacteria. Okay, so that is all I have on bacteria today. Have a great day.